Hello, Rhea. Welcome.
Hi, Abhi. Thank you.
Welcome to the first ever Wisdom Jam. And welcome to everybody who's logging in and watching this not live. Uh, we did 21 of these wisdom talks, which many people saw, shared feedback with. And I think 21 times we asked the speakers the question, what is wisdom? And I think after getting 21 answers, I guess it hit us that wisdom cannot be codified. It has to emerge. And we said we need to shift this format. While there was a value to the interview format, can we lean into a different format, an unknown format, uh, which is the format of a jam? And I'm so happy to start this series of jams, jamming with you, Ria. So I'm going to just do a short introduction for people who are viewing. Ria is my favorite facilitator. I've seen lots of facilitators. I think Ria, when you were facilitating, I think it was one of those moments for me where I was like, this is it. This is one of those workshops where you were so with the participant, uh, and the participant was saying, "When will my pain ever end?" And you said, "What if it never ends?" Uh, and that was quite a moment for me to see someone facilitate so intimately. And that was probably one of the earliest times I kind of experienced you. But since then, yeah, it's been you're a very dear co-traveler, friend, and I was seeing 27 years of experience in organization transformation. And I definitely also want to mention the most recent kind of birth of One Design Studio, which is a cozy, nice space I hear in Bandra, which is going to be buzzing with a lot of action, community, and so on. And that your biodata starts with an artist, not a facilitator. The first thing it says is it's an artist. So
Yeah,
yeah, so welcome, Ria, and so glad to have you with all your being here.
thank you. Thanks, Abhi.
So maybe we can check in with just what's alive for you in this moment. How are you doing? I could check in with how am I doing.
um, how am I doing? So we just concluded our 1 day sort of workshop, I guess, over here at One Design, and Kiran had been holding space for that on unraveling your heart song. Um, and I found myself saying, I am living my heart song. And that's what is alive for me. The community is sometimes it has been a concept, but more and more it is a lived reality. You know, even when I'm by myself, right? That's a notion that community means there has to be somebody else. But there are so many of me's inside me anyway.
True, true.
Right? So I'm
Yeah.
a community,
Yeah.
even as I stand by myself, and to come back to that in moments, right? And
Hmm.
while dancing with that. So that's what is alive. And as I said, I'm glad you didn't call me for the wisdom talks because I don't know I have any wisdom to give or talk, let alone. But jam, I like the feeling of jam, right? You
Hmm.
jam with music when I'm playing my drums. There are many instruments playing, right? Like, and somewhere in that music, perhaps wisdom happens
Hmm.
an
Hmm.
unknowing way.
Hmm.
And there's a beauty of that emergence, which I'm finding myself very grateful for,
Hmm.
even as we explore this. So, yeah, thank you.
So where I am, I got in touch with my old self who would start a wisdom talk and get into a very interviewer kind of a mode.
Mhm.
And then inside me, like you said, there are many selves. I call it a republic of selves for myself. The way is and also because I'm a great believer in democracy, and so I say that there's a parliament of various abhisheks and they negotiate with each other so that, it's not a dictatorship of one type of Abhishek. There's always negotiation. So as soon as I went live, the Abhishek that was the interviewing Abhishek, which is very different, right? Because there's a certain dynamic in interviewing, a certain space from where we interview, right? Like ask. So that got evoked first. And then I got in touch with saying, is that the space for a jam? And I'm like, no, maybe not. Maybe a different space. And then, so I just got in touch with an internal shuffle in my community, my internal community,
Yeah.
beings and cells. And as you evoked it, I think I got more in touch with that. So yeah, but there's joy. There is. Well, it's very hard to not. For me, I do struggle with what is the natural me. Like there's जो खुल के जो दिल से मैं हूँ और जो बनावटी वाला है वो भी पता है. There is a and it pops up time to time, and it's interesting that in this community of selves, especially when live, especially when talks, it's always that shuffle between so many different beings. So I was also getting in touch with that as you were sharing, and the search for what is, the search for in this moment, what is the truest expression of me? I think that is.
Yeah. I like what you said. What is in this moment? Which of you is wanting to be here? Which of me is wanting to be here? I guess. Yeah, I guess that's the true one. In this moment.
जो भी आ रहे हैं, the gang of me's that shows up in this moment, we'll take them to be the true ones.
Yeah, I find that very analogous to how nature functions, right? Like in nature, some stuff will only grow here, some other stuff of the same stuff will show up in some other places, right? Like I have bought this one plant over here with me from home, and in my house it grew very differently. Same plant, right? It's how nature senses what is available, how much is available, who else am I sharing the space with. And then there are birds. We don't have as many birds here coming randomly. And so in order to protect them, it does something, leaves cover themselves up and protect the smaller ones. और यहाँ पे वैसा नहीं है. So here it just like opens up. The same plant shows different aspects of itself. So in tune with its environment, right? And that I find just amazing. It's not the same plant everywhere. So therefore, it's true. It's true here in this context.
Beautiful. Yeah. The context. It's an interplay between the seed, which is the original seed of the plant, and the context.
Yeah.
Like they're also jamming, I guess.
They are, and I think we are never not jamming. Except when we are worried about our bread butter. Yeah, so
it took me a moment to get to bread, butter, and jam.
Please, I'm so sorry. This is
that's why it took me
my brand of joke.
Bread, butter, and jam. Yeah.
My head, it is very funny.
Yeah. Yeah. True. When you say human-centered, Rhea, I was curious because we started with talking about nature, and we talk about human-centered design. I'm sure you mean it in a certain spirit of things also. So I was, because I was getting mindful about this whole thoda slippery zone of nature and human being and the mind and the emergence, and I don't want to go intellectual into that at all. I think I was curious about how do you distinguish, what's the distinction of the spirit of human-centeredness, like human-centered, is it? Yeah, I was curious, how do you...
So, full disclosure, when you asked about this topic, I had a reaction to it. And I was, because how I used to think about it and how I have grown to think about it are different. And I want to talk about both. And I thought maybe that's what is needed, right? For us to talk about it in this way that at least I understand it more and more every day. Earlier, like some maybe 10, 12 odd years ago, when human-centered design started to become famous, it was human at the center of design, right? That's how we understood it. Human-centric, designed for human beings, whether it is a product design, process design, spaces design, blah, blah, blah. Who's the human at the center, and therefore how do we design for it? And over the period of time, somehow that approach left me wanting, that somewhere at some point we kind of took, because some of these human-centric products and processes were not working, right? Meaning, we're saying, okay, there's a human and he says, okay, I'm going to design for a human-centered experience and I will go and do empathy interviews and I'll ask him what he wants and provide him. Now, inside of that, my assumption is that human being knows what he wants and what's best for him. That's my premise, right? Assumption. What if it is not that? Because if I give him 100% of the human-centered solution, that doesn't automatically mean it's going to work for the system.
Right.
It may or may not work for him. Right? And so then I looked at what does it mean to have eco-centered design, ecology-centered designs, because eventually that is what it is, right? In this ecology, what will sustain? What will I grow? Right? Put it into perspective, if given the work that I do, we would do a whole lot of, let's say, leadership work. Leaders get prepared. And it is a human-centered approach. So we listen to him, we listen to his story, listen to what happens, and listen to everything and design and do it. But let's say I'm being optimistic when say 4 out of 10 times it sticks. So then that got me worried. That there's so much of effort and intent and money and resources are going in this. How is it not sticking and why is it not sticking? Doesn't make sense, because I know for a fact it is a human-centered approach, right? But it wasn't. Where it missed the mark was it wasn't eco-centered. So you empowered somebody in a particular way, then he goes back after the 3, 4, 5 days or 6 months or 10 months into an ecosystem which doesn't know anything about this. Not ready to receive him. And so he now knows that this is not working. Earlier, at least he didn't know it was working. So that kind of clash is painful.
Yeah.
Right? And he or she doesn't even know how to make your environment more conducive. Or that it is even necessary.
Yeah.
And so that was one, right? And then it kind of led me to think, I think the book that I would recommend anybody is Ishmael, Daniel Quinn, in which he talks about the two stories, right? There's a story one in which human is at the center of all this, etc., etc. But in story two, so the assumption that we make when we call it like that is that the human being is not nature. He is just as much the ecosystem and the environment, right? And therefore, in my mind now, the new version 2.0 of HCD, for me, is where human being is able to thrive in a conversation with the environment. Where he and the environment are talking. The design involves the environment and the system that he or she is going to spend X amount of time in. We build that into the design. Without that, it is a disservice. To me, that's what human-centered design means. That this human is a part of the ecology just as much. He's not just occupying space. He's interacting with that space.
Nice.
There is an intelligence there. Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
This evokes several threads, but I'm going to pick the one right now, which has a lot of energy around ecology. In my thinking, in this leadership journey, I mean, there was a journey of working with individuals, then doing the standard journey, if I have to call that, with training, facilitation, OD, I mean, whatever. Everybody goes through a very similar journey, I think. And at some stage, I realized that there is the invisible entities. There are invisible entities that are playing havoc with an organization or blessing an organization. There's the organization spirit, which is not spoken about but exists and is a part. There's also the rules of the game, so to speak, where when I was looking at behaviors of people and trying to change them at some stage, it started becoming visible to me that there are invisible rules that are driving people to act in certain ways, and those rules, we are not able to hold them as an object and see them. We take them in. And so then so much of my effort, which was earlier about changing, say, behaviors, now started moving to these invisible entities of rules and spirits and metaphors, and how they all create a literally like a superstructure.
Yes.
They're all floating there, and then we're all kind of acting. We feel acting out of our own free will, but it's like all these things are going. And so for me, when you evoke the word ecology, it's of course the planet, it's plants, animals, human beings. There's also these entities for me, right? Like, because they're these shaping archetypes which are driving things.
Yes.
Yeah, and I so for me, some of the work then became how do I engage with them head on? Like by head on, I mean actively, not hoping as a side effect things change, but like taking them, naming them, visualizing them, engaging with them, and some culture work got born out of that. And it was also because when I looked at the current people in power across the world and in India, I could see how more than even ideology or training, or they were able to work with the symbolism, they were able to work with culture over an extended period of time to, they use those forces. I feel like they used very deep forces to power themselves and root themselves. Like there's something here which I wasn't seeing, and so I think that also gets evoked for me when you say ecology. Right? All of this. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think you said it. We get confused between archetypes and stereotypes.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes I'm guilty of that as well. I have stereotypes, some archetypes, right? But I think what I'm hearing is just like this journey of acknowledging the invisible in a very overt way. Because anyway, it is there. You might as well, right? Might as well just say it. Like, just to give an example, like just today, there was this one girl who walked in yesterday. She wasn't a part of the group. She just literally walked in. She came for a pottery class, and then she walked in. And she said, I don't know why I came in. I just felt I wanted to talk to you. And she's like all of 19. And she sits here, and some conversation later, I said, why don't you just come up tomorrow, which is today? And she came in. This is like, so there was a conversation on abundance, like getting in touch with abundance. The whole group was having, and so on and so forth. And then we did, where do we want to move? So I was holding the space for a social presencing theater tableau. And in the middle of all of that, she came and sat right at the center. She sat down in the center when everybody's around. I mean, people were doing different things. She sat there and she didn't get up for the first tableau or the other. And there was one of the participants who went and drew a lotus on the board. Okay, and then he came and sat here. And then when it started to unfold, I was just checking whether I can say her name. I can. Her name is Hiranya, which is the name of goddess Lakshmi. Right? And this whole thing that kind of came together, what is this conversation about? Like with her sitting in the center with the lotus drawn, and she did not get up. She just sat there, right? And I can't tell you how amazingly beautiful it was. Like, this is the missing conversation, right? About money, about abundance, about many things. And this became like the central thing. And it was just, this was emergence, right? Nobody could have seen it before it happened.
Totally.
And then now to connect the dots from the invisible, bringing it into the visible and saying, therefore, what is this?
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, you manifested something right there. Yeah, very beautiful. Such a privilege to experience this happen actually.
Yeah.
Like to even see it actually happen, and it's like darshan. एक तरह के दर्शन ही है ये.
Bilkul.
You know.
And yeah.
Yeah, even I mean, I've observed this that in groups and particularly in leading or anchoring groups, okay, there is a certain type, right? There's a struggling energy of one person who's struggling to get along with the community, and then we had a journey where this person then kind of we tried to make it work, it didn't work. This person parted ways. The collective thought, "हो गया, चलो." That person's now parted ways. Now we are the healthy collective. पर उस हेल्दी कलेक्टिव में भी एक वो वापस मैनिफेस्ट होने लगा, किसी और में मैनिफेस्ट होने लगा, राइट? द सेम एनर्जी ऑफ द पर्सन विद द कलेक्टिव manifesting somebody we never thought it will happen. And again, this pattern, I'm saying BRM over a decade plus right now. So I saw and I'm like, this is an archetypical energy. Who embodies it? It's not personal.
Yeah.
I realized, like, especially in groups and communities where earlier I would make it very personal, like this is that kind of a person. This is like, no, these are all, they seem to be energies and configurations and dancing, and somehow not personalizing them so much. I would earlier very personalize them, very self-help, you can do it, awaken the giant within kind of mindset. वो तू है.
Oh my God, I haven't heard that title in a while.
So deep that American self-helpness was so I'd overloaded myself on it. So I would see people very individually, and then slowly with my work in the social space, I started seeing further layers which were not made visible by the classic self-help literature. And I think just that these energies, these archetypes, it's like every organization is its own Mahabharat, so it will have its own kind of characters, right? And and so what I think what you're saying is also important from the lens that how do we bring these also into our conversation and our day-to-day experience, right? Not talk about it as if it's like a cuckoo concept that is left for. Yeah, I think for me, some of our work is about bringing this into the core groups, like to be able to talk about it without feeling weird or awkward about it, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I mean, with this one design space, that is definitely an intention that I hold, right? Like these boundaries of silos and divides that, artists are such kind of people, and scientists and engineers are another kind of people, and business guys are like this. And there is, I don't know how to put it. Like there is this like closeness about it, like we are this, right?
Yeah.
And there is no cross pollination. Imagine if the nature world behaved like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Imagine like there was no cross pollination, be just so much hard work. But I also see that there are a lot of sort of judgments, right? On both sides, multiple sides, right? And I had them as well, and I sometimes still do. Then I would look at, thankfully, that's why I write the artist. It took me a long time to acknowledge my artist identity, because, given that I'm an engineer and a business in the business thing, I also thought like that. I thought, if I put my artist, it might do something to this identity, right? And there was no other way to claim it than to name it. Out, middle and center. Last couple of years, I think a year and a half ago, when I was called to hold Grief Circle for an organization for which I was a consultant, I had another, like I'm seen like this, and now I'll be seen like this. Right? So to bring that part out of the shadow is not easy work, but it is a necessary work. And now when I see, what is that giant within, you said? What is that?
Awaken the giant
Awaken
within.
the giant within. Correct. So now I hear it very differently. Like this giant that sits inside of me, which knows and holds so much power. How do I bring that out without feeling shy about it, etc. And the I think the part that gets to me, what you were saying earlier, right? In deep democracy, that's the work we do. We look at how it's a role, not the person. Okay, the role has a constellation, space in the constellation. Somebody occupies that role, but we think we make it about the person. So the person leaves, but the role still remains. So another person comes and occupies that slot. Because there is a need for that in the constellation.
Right.
You see through the systemic lens. Without that, the whole formation changes. So I think the dialogue in a human-centric system method is to say what is the role that this role is playing in the well-being of the system? How can how can we enable it? Give it seat at the table.
Yeah, bilkul.
And in not doing so, there's a huge disservice. Huge disservice. I think the conversation we had today was when on the one hand we talk about celebration and joy, and grief is not talked about. So where does grief go?
Yeah.
It occupies space, and then it moves in all kinds of ways to all kinds of spaces. But if it had a place, it would sit there, no? Like you respectful space if you give it.
Yeah, bilkul.
Yeah.
I have so many things to say to this, but again, I'm going to pick the most couple of alive threads. I think what you were talking about, nature and roles, in my Blue Ribbon experience, earlier in my MBA experience, we would have the free riders. And then in BRM also, you would have people who would actually basically just draw from the system and not contribute back to it, thereby depleting the system or so. At some stage, I started seeing this differently because I said that what we think of as parasites, one is they are an evidence of the health of a system, that this system is generating surplus value. And that they are present is an indicator. When they start leaving, it means we're not generating surplus value anymore.
That's a great.
And then,
that's a really nice reframe.
And that they provide redundancy that we may not be able to see. Like, should I say, अच्छा एक ही लंग का जरूरत है तो दूसरे का क्या रोल है, वो तो एक्स्ट्रा न्यूट्रिशन खा रहा है. So a lot of people who may seem parasites then in crisis situations or stretch times would step in and build so much resilience in the system that we didn't know till a system reaches a crisis, right? Or they're doing something invisible that's not visible to me as the space holder of the system, but they're doing an informal conversation with someone. And and interestingly, also some of these people were also people who had their own kind of mental health challenges and very sensitive people. And now that you're saying grief and a lot of unhealthy or denied emotions then flow into very sensitive parts of the ecosystem, and they start holding that. And then to force them to be productive is just violence on them, right? Because they're holding something for the collective. They're holding. So I think just seeing that whole interplay of how these people are not parasites sucking value from the system, seeing that they're surplus holders, resilience builders, to now saying that they're actually holding something for the system. Yeah. Right. And I think so that's kind of what comes to me. That's what came to me as a sweep. And sorry, the last thing was, and that they have power in the system. Yeah. That for me to be a quote unquote giant, like I was leading BRM for a long stretch of time. And when I was leading it, I realized that for me to be giant, I need blessings of everybody. I am a giant only when I'm blessed by the system to be the giant. Otherwise, I'm just fighting the system to be the giant, right? Which I'm not. So again, my earlier awaken the giant within worldview was that I have to be the leader and I have to excel and be the top, and I'll be the alpha male in the pack. from there again to seeing the ecology and seeing that leader is also a role, and it works with blessings of everybody, is when it truly is able to do it, right? And that includes the so-called parasites also, whether it's psychic permission or real permission. I think we're giving each other permission all the time, no? Like
Yes.
to be ourselves.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's so much here to learn from nature, right? There's so much.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, it is just crazy. Last few months, um, especially last Christmas, one day, one snail entered. I saw one snail walking by in my in my house, and I was surprised because I live in a flat. It's not um, uh, it's not like open and this and that. Meaning, it's on the first floor. But nevertheless, like when I was seeing her walk, and ever since then, I've been fascinated by slugs and snails. You know, um, and how they move, and how how they stretch and come back, right? And they leave this thing, little film, wherever they walk. It's a healing thing, apparently, right? And to think that in all of this movement, what is it that, how can we as human beings, that's one expression of me, right? How can I learn to be like that? And to your conversation on parasites, right? In a sort of systemic thing, how can the roles move, or how can the energy move through roles? Otherwise, if it gets stuck, then there is no movement. That's when entropy sets in,
Hmm, hmm, hmm,
right? With no movement. Yeah.
hmm, hmm, hmm,
With what does that mean? See, I've been playing this role, and now I must also play other roles.
hmm, hmm, hmm.
Otherwise, I've set up the other person to play that role,
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
the system has to continue. If I don't, if I don't do that also, or I don't do something else, my spot. It's like those four pillars we used to play as children, no? And there will be the middle person, and you have to quickly move. नहीं तो तुम्हारा spot चला जाएगा.
Right, right.
And there would be a time when everybody gets scared and stand in our own pillars, and there is no game then.
Yeah, the game's over. True, true, true. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Even the when we do this Mahabharat immersion with Raghu, a workshop that we do, and day 3 evening there is a Kuttu performance. Kuttu is their traditional style of depicting scenes from Mahabharat. So brilliant performance, obviously, by artists who come from that tradition. And then so we were complimenting artists on the roles they play, and that was really good. We discovered that they don't have fixed roles. They show up, and that evening, what's the energy they feel like embodying? And
Isn't
they,
that
they just
beautiful?
yeah, they just tune into saying, okay, today I feel like embodying this, so I'll play this. And they have their own nuanced take on that particular role as well. And it's so beautiful because it's just like you're literally downloading and embodying an energy that wants to be expressed, and you're really being a channel, right? Like you're being an actor, but you're not acting from yourself, but from something beyond.
Yeah.
So it was so powerful to find that out, that there is this dance of energies and so on. Uh, yeah. The reason I felt a little distracted, or a passing thought that came to me was so one was, yeah, of course, the moving energy and system moves. Always been fascinated with the idea of dams. There are check dams, of course. Check dams to hote hain, but the big dams, and we protest against big dams. They destroy a lot. They also hold water, and then they release it in a way that it converts into a whole different type of energy.
Yeah.
Electricity becomes electricity. And similarly in yoga there are the bandhas. You एक बंधन ले लेते हैं जब हम, तो it starts generating a lot of power. And so I'm also curious, so on one end, yes, there is the truth of the dancing energy, and then on the other end I wonder whether in systems or organizations or even the body, right, what happens when you take a bandhan intentionally and build that energy to channelize it further into something, and I'm always fascinated by that as well. So because the two are kind of both they're both happening, isn't it? Like there's the mushroom, but there's also the large tree, which is continuously growing to become the large tree and not
Yeah,
dissipating its nutrients, but becoming that and serving something else. So
yeah, yeah.
I think that whole side also spoke like came up.
Yeah. No, I can see what you're saying, and perhaps that's where the word design comes in, right? Like in my mind, design is who we are in our intention. You know, and if that's what is my intention, then I will design accordingly.
See that again, I think that's very important. Design is who I am in my intention.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes.
Is the intention I carry within me.
Yes. And so when you start to design something, what you are putting out there, making visible, making overt, what is inside you? Your intention. Right? So the other way to see it is when you look at a design, you know the intent of whoever conceived it or brought it to form. Right? And so back to the dam conversation, if that is the design to convert an energy from one form to the other to serve whatever it is to serve, then it has integrity. Right? But if it is thought like that, then it got designed somewhere else, and you say, then it doesn't work.
Right. Beautiful.
And there is a role for every. There is a purpose for every role. Right? My favorite example, my favorite test example is of a valence electron.
I think I've heard this one, but yeah.
You heard it, no? Yeah. That it has such an amazing role to play in making us. But all the while, if it became so valence electron is the electron in the outermost orbit of the smallest thing, which is an atom. And right at the nucleus, you have the protons and the neutrons, and they're in this little happy family. And the electrons keeps running round and round and imagines how it might be right there in the center, and I'm not at the center. But it keeps moving around and pining to want to belong to the center, right? But because it is so farthest outside in the outermost orbit and it wants to come there, just that yearning develops so much power and energy inside it because it is like that, because it has to work that much more. And it keeps rotating and moving, and sometimes it gets sad. It feels sad. And what is this? I'm doing the same thing over and over again. Then it sometimes looks out into the void, right? And it feels it can belong there at times. Until one day, somewhere out of the void, it hears another valence electron, which is another atom slowly moving towards it, and then it joins hands with that, right? And to form covalent bonds. And that's how life comes into being. Just this one isolated, and just to see that electron had a purpose all along. The role of the valence electrons is to form bonds with others.
Beautiful.
And there are times when many of us, I would imagine by a stretch of imagination, that all of us have at some point felt like the valence electron. You felt like you didn't belong. Right? And at that moment, to see this as a possibility.
Beautiful.
From that.
Yeah.
And, like in systems, right? Like, the fringes are so important. You come to know the shape of something only when you touch the edges, right?
Yeah. Beautiful. That last 5-minute clip, Rhea, I just want to reflect it back to you because in such an elegant way, you moved from talking about a very spiritual, to me, landing very spiritual intent and manifesting that intent to design thinking, to ontological approach of integrity, to ecology, to systems thinking, to chemistry, to relationships in such a seamless manner. It's just so beautiful. It's just so beautiful that you're able to stitch across what are otherwise siloed disciplines. And just want to reflect back. It was very beautiful to hear it. It was very, very beautiful. Thank you for sharing it in that seamless way. Yeah. This intent thing also rings in the social space. I was this Enthu. I am still a Enthu bunny. Now, what's the next big thing to do? Like, let's what's next? How do we shift things and so on? So once I kind of moved to reached an elder and said, okay, what's the next thing now? We've accomplished this. Now tell me what's the next thing. What's your guidance? So he said, Abhishek, from now on, I'd just like you to purify your intent. So I said, okay, I'll purify my intent. And now tell me, what should I do having purified my intent? So like, no, nothing, just purify intent. I'm like, that's it? He's like, yeah, now this is your work. This is all you need to do. Just keep purifying your intent. This was years ago, but I thought it was an easy one. But I realized like just tuning into my intent, and it's a bundle of complex intents, and some which I like, some which I don't like, some which are in shadow. So it was quite powerful for me that just purify intent, and the seed of who I am. And I loved that you mentioned कि design भी एक तरह से design से designer की नियत का पता चल जाता है. So that's how I heard it.
Yes, yes.
It is making people do this. Designer की नियत ये है.
Yes, yes.
And it's how we manifest ourselves, I guess. Design just seems to be how I manifest my intent into the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And then now imagine in the backdrop of this human being, when there is a connection to earth, right? From that space, through that intent, how else can you design? Right? It's a backward connection in some form of way, right? Like this remembering, restoring our relationship with the earth and ourselves, and therefore the things that we create. Right? I mean, Raghu, I think...
Let me make sure if I heard it correctly, that what I heard was standing on this earth and being connected to the impulse of life. That itself at the source of my intent. How else would I design when that's
when I remember that?
When I remember that that's at my very core.
Yes. When I remember that I am just like the tree or this or that, the expression, right? Like, an apple tree is not in a competition with the passion fruit flower, right? But they're both expressions of nature, and so am I. Right? From that place of connection, right? I don't need to be motivated. I don't need to, it's funny at one point, right? If my finger gets hurt and it's bleeding, I don't need to listen to motivational talks to take care of my finger, right?
Yeah.
Because it is mine. Just because it doesn't look like something else, this is what happens, right? Like, this is what it is. So and so is like that. But if you are able to hold it and remember, then it is a natural self-expression, isn't it?
True.
But we forget. Maybe that's part of the design.
That's a part of the designer's design, maybe. But I'm very happy to tell you that we do a culture map, with organizations as a part of our work. And the central box of that is called core intent. And core intent is just, what are you trying to do beneath it all? Like, what's the point? What was it that you started? What's the heartbeat of the system that you again and again keep doing? Or I say, kis cheez ki aap sadhana kar rahe ho? What is the one thing you keep holding on to that leads to everything else being held? And can I come to my organization's core intent? What is that? And just that exploration is so fascinating, because it's not vision, mission, it is none of that. It's much subtler than that, right? Just like what's giving what makes it tick? Like, what are we doing again and again all the time? Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, I mean, in most of my work with organization, that's the one thing I have felt more than heard or seen is that the idea has a soul and a purpose of its own,
Hmm.
and it comes through some people. It wants to manifest. We are
Yes.
one design. It's not mine. I'm a steward at best, and I'll try my best to serve it. Right? But the moment I'm not able to hold it or serve it, it will move on. And as it must, it will
Hmm.
perpetuate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, I'm curious about this one, Rhea. Now that you say that the ideas are also wanting to manifest, I think it's a two-way
Yeah.
bargain of
Yeah.
उसको भी आना है, तुम्हें आने देना है, नहीं. And for me, my beckoner is like super strong, right? Like hundreds of ideas keep flirting with me, and then it's always like, oh, ये भी खूबसूरत है, ये भी चलो दोनों को. And I'm curious, and I don't mind it honestly. Earlier, I was all about focus. Now I'm like, I'm very happy to be, in love with a lot of ideas simultaneously. Uh, and now I'm reaching a place where I'm like, maybe that time is over, and now I need to find my dreamer and not just be a beckoner who's, the sailor being called by the mermaids kind of a thing, but really own a dream and say, okay, this, like शादी कर लेनी चाहिए अब एक आइडिया से kind of a feeling आ रहा है, naturally आ रहा है बिना कुछ किए. I guess and I'm curious because as an artist, as a highly creative person, I'm sure there's a lot that's flirting with you at any point of time, right? Ideas, possibilities. How's that experience and how's that negotiation? Is it, yeah, are you able to let go of ideas? I'm just curious about what that process is.
Hmm. Um, so, yes, as an Enneagram 7, I know this very deeply and intimately, this thing with multiple ideas and so on and so forth. And over a period of time, mostly through dream journaling and journaling, I have noticed that they're not necessarily many all different ideas. They're different formats of some 4 or 5 main ideas. They're not different ideas. So that
Like
was a
different
big saver
facets
for
of
me. Yes, the facets of the
beautiful,
same thing.
beautiful.
So otherwise, I was like, I used to really beat myself up for the same thing. That, oh my God, you've got 100 ideas. I don't have 100 ideas. I have 100 variations, or maybe 90 variations of some ideas.
Yes, beautiful.
So
Yeah.
that was that. Because I realized there's a repetition of something, right? And this thing of community, for example, is a repetition. Okay, and there'll be another repetition. The manifestation of that comes out in different forms, but they're not different ideas by themselves. Right? And in a way, in my mind, I think of them as those beings that you talked about. Like this one will call out and this one will call out. And I'm saying, which one wants to be birthed right now? What combination wants to be birthed? And therefore, I have to be still to know which one just comes out. So I don't negotiate. Right? But being able to discern. And in that silence, the others drop. Some of them are just like distractions sometimes, but they're not all bad. Because over the period of time, my friend Savvy, she was once mentioning to me that I think 10, 11 years ago, when in the middle of some session, I drew the place that I'm having right now. And it has always been that thing. I called it something else that time, but it was always there. It was always there in the background. Waiting for the right Ritu to sort of happen. And it gets teased out by these ideas. But to also follow that impulse to some degree. So as a practice, what I've done as a hack for myself, right? I see which idea lasts for more than 6 minutes.
More than 6 months.
6 minutes.
6 minutes. Okay.
Right? If it's lasted 6 minutes, then it comes on my paper.
Okay.
Otherwise, it comes and it goes. I don't have to act on everything that crosses my mind. Right? But I let it cross my mind knowing I have a 6 minute marker. So I don't fight it. I don't reject them. Because the more I reject them, the fiercer they come.
Nice. Yeah.
So I let them come, let them go. If it stays and hovers around longer, then we do something about it.
Nice.
So
Yeah. My experience of this Akashic plane, keh sakte hain, ya the ideas realm, gets heightened when I'm in a bipolar kind of manic phase, because at that time it's like you're just pushed into the field of ideas. Like, get once post recovery, as I was processing it, I think one of the things that came to me, was being alive on the planet at this time is a privilege. In the sense, it's almost like the keys of manifestation on this plane. Each of us is holding some of those keys, and these ideas, when they come and they want to be born, the fact that at this moment my presence on this planet gives me the agency to have that manifest.
Yes.
And
beautiful. I mean, I'm so glad you're saying this, that sometimes I really feel like, who am I to edit them, right? But if I became the steward and said, okay, this, and I shall do as you ask. It gets me out of the way. It doesn't put stress on me if I leave half-baked ideas. But I was like, you decided it. If this is what you're choosing, so be it. At other times, I have to like this thing, for example, this thing that I'd done 100 days, 100 blogs last year. Every day, and that was a idea, right? 100 days, 100 blogs. And honestly, I didn't feel I could do it. 100 days every day with zero prep.
Wow.
To show up and trust that something will come out.
Radical. That sounds very radical. Yeah.
But it was extremely vulnerable, right? To be at that place, because what if something doesn't come up? There's a couple of times at 10 o'clock, somebody has called me, said, what is this? You haven't published yet.
It's a risk. That's quite a radical step.
Yeah. But just staying with it and trusting the process, and having faith. But I think what I've learned is, first you have to hold faith, then faith holds you.
Wow. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So
one way, and this is probably as we're coming closer to our time, maybe one of the last things I'll say, and then I'll open it for you to share. One way I make sense of it is also being the eye of the body. Eye as in Akh. So earlier I would curse myself in some ways of saying I have so many ideas and I don't want to execute all of them, and I leave it with people to execute and all that, the whole stress of it. And now I'm like, ab mujhe dikh raha hai, so I can't unsee what I'm seeing. You can completely ignore it, because not everything that the eye sees, the body needs to act on. Right?
Yeah.
I can see my room and there are hundreds of things that need to be done. The eye is reporting all of that. But then there is a brain, there's a heart, there is a hand, there's a stomach. So, वो उनका हिसाब है. And I'm like, अब मैं आँख हूँ. And earlier I would feel very guilty about having my own special eyelid and eyelashes, like, why privilege? But then I'm like, if I am the eye, I'm not the nails. I don't need regular pruning. I need an eyelid and eyelashes. And I'm a high maintenance item. Without judging that, I think for me, the journey of acknowledging it, ठीक है, मुझे ये दिख रहा है, तो I'll relay it. I'll not privilege it. I think so for me, the space of ideas and my access to that, I'm like, yeah, I'm seeing these, so I'll voice them, because that's my role in the ecosystem also, to say what I'm seeing. Because if I don't do that, I'll not be true to my own voice then.
Yes.
And I think that, and that was one. The other thing on the eye piece that came was also, I was a few times in this conversation, the way you were able to see things was fascinating for me. Like, I think the energy moving versus the dam, and then you're able to see it in an integrated kind of a design intent way, and then multiple ideas, but you're able to zoom out and see it as facets of one idea. And it's almost like I loved that you're able to shift planes and see. It's like हम Earth पे बात कर रहे हैं, you're able to take a flight and then look at it, and that's another form of the eye for me, like being able to see something deeper or beyond. So that it was really nice to see it. It was really nice. It was really nice to experience that. Yeah.
Yeah. In the end, when you are looking at, I think from that place of seeing, how you do anything is how you do everything. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel complete. Nothing to add after what you said. But as a practice, if you want to just zoom back into the hour and helicopter, what Kiran says, helicopter on the conversation, just to look at it. I'm curious how the conversation was for you, what stood out for you. And maybe we can close with that, maybe a checkout.
The conversation, for me was like the poem Daffodils. When we were in school, there was a poem, Dancing with the Daffodils. That's like the image that popped in my head around. Maybe it's the background colors where you're sitting. Perhaps. So it could be that. But yeah, it just felt warm and breezy and real and moving and still at the same time.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I'm leaving with always great to see sparks of your brilliance and the ease with which you're able to synthesize, and the elegance and speed, and so it's always very beautiful to see. It's always very beautiful to relish. So relishing a lot of that, and also relishing parts of me that got evoked, unexpectedly evoked, and things that I felt very comfortable talking about because you were on the other end. I don't think I would have said some of these things if there would be someone else. And I think just your presence made much easier for me to talk about things which were invisible or entities or anything else. So yeah.
I'm totally celebrating that. I'm genuinely, and I wish more people are able to do that, right? Like to see when somebody asks me about this place, it is genuinely like literally like that. Somebody's asking what? What punctuated exhalations?
What's happening there?
I'm breathing and taking in this daffodil breeze. This is energizing. Yeah.
Maybe Rhea, a little about One Design Studio before we close. Maybe tell us about. Just if you want to share with listeners, why not a bit?
Yeah, sure. So this is an idea long in the making, like I said, right? And it came from a couple of places, right? This whole, especially post-COVID in the last 3 years, holding grief circles, holding spaces. So that was one, and people feeling this isolation has gone too far. Okay, and the need to belong. That was one. And the other is in my work with organizations and teams and leaders, etc. Out of the three stated needs, invariably one of them is a connection in organizations. And I also noticed as I sat and synthesized my last 2.5 years of work one day, that when people go back, no matter what is the content, when you ask them how they're feeling, they say, feel so happy meeting other people. Glad to have met so and so. And I was like, this is what it is. That's the design. That's just one design in this whole thing. It's about connection. That's it. Like when that connection is there, you thrive. When that connection weakens or breaks, you go into other spaces, right? So that's how this whole thing of building connected communities, right?
Nice.
Because communities is our future. And in one design, the hope is to curate different themes, workshops, talks, etc., to explore this theme. So that maybe we can practice what does it mean to be a community in the future. How can we live as a community? This is a prototype in that direction.
Nice, beautiful.
Yeah.
और कम्युनिटी और कनेक्ट सुन के मुझे बीआरएम का कम्युनिटी कनेक्ट फेलोशिप भी याद आ गया. Because we have a program called Community Connect Fellowship, and I think we're all at this stage.
Yes, we are all going there. And one of the things I found, unfortunately, in many communities, there is community, and and I would always be curious. The designer mind in me would be curious about what is this? This is a problem, right? It's a big, hairy, audacious problem that I'm trying to look at. And I think one of the things is we understand why we need a community, because at the end of the day, we want to belong. We do everything, our choice of clothes, friends, things, vocation, to belong, right? So we know the why of community, we know the what of community, we don't know the how of building community. What is it that one needs to do or not do as a process, right? If safety is important, if learning is important, if celebration is important, how do you enable that? How can you have more people be able to build communities which are thriving? And how can design answer that question? That's what one design is after.
बहुत बढ़िया. और आपकी तरफ से सभी को इनविटेशन भी कि जब भी मौका मिले आइएगा. Thank you, Rhea. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for being here.